These classes just did a complete 180 in the new D&D rule set. One of them may even be the best class in the game. D&D's new rules feature a lot of upgrades to classes, but I'd argue none got more done for them than the Monk, Warlock, and Sorcerer. So let's start with the award for most improved, the Monk. To kick things off at level 1, the Monk gets an improved version of our old martial arts feature that affords us certain benefits that use our unarmed strikes and Monk weapons, which are now all simple melee weapons and martial weapons with the light property. As usual, we can use dexterity instead of strength for attack and damage rolls with unarmed strikes and monk weapons. But we can also use dexterity in place of strength for grapples and shoves as well. What's more, grapples and shoves in the new rules are unarmed strikes themselves, so we'll have a lot of flexibility here, especially since we can now always use a bonus action to make an unarmed strike, instead of just when we attack with our action. Finally, we'll get our martial arts die that we can use in place of our usual damage from unarmed strikes and monk weapons. That die now starts at a D6 instead of a D4 and goes all the way up to a D12 at later levels. Gone are the days of creating a better monk with a fighter in the unarmed fighting style. According to the playtest material, we'll also get our old unarmored defense for an AC of 10 plus our dexterity and wisdom modifiers so long as we aren't wearing armor or a shield. This hasn't always been the most generous AC calculation for monks, but I don't think we'll be too worried about it for reasons we'll address in just a moment. At level 2, we'll unlock our monk's focus point system, which was called Key in 2014 and Discipline in the playtest. I'll probably just call them Miyagi points instead. As before, we'll be able to use these points for various abilities, but now most of these abilities are actually free to use, and spending points just expands their usability. Patient Defense allows us to disengage as a bonus action for free, or spend a focus point to disengage and dodge as a bonus action. Similarly, Step of the Wind allows monks to dash as a bonus action for free, or spend a focus point to disengage, dash, and have your jump distance doubled as a bonus action. Flurry of Blows will still cost a focus point for you to make 2 unarmed strikes as a bonus action, but you no longer have to attack with your action in order to activate it. And you can use those strikes for grapples and shoves too. We will still get a 10-foot bonus to our movement speed while not wearing armor or a shield, and we'll get a completely new feature in Uncanny Metabolism that allows us to once per long rest, regain all focus points when you roll initiative, and regain hit points equal to our monk level plus a roll of our martial arts die. This alone solves a lot of the problems that the old monk had, granting you more focus points for doing cool stuff as well as increasing the survivability of a melee combatant that does still only have a D8 hit die. But there's even more working in our favor as we move to level 3 with Deflect Attacks. Do yourself a favor and just forget about the old Deflect Missiles ability from 2014. It was rarely used and wasn't even that great of an ability when you did have the chance to utilize it. The new version will allow us to reduce the damage of any attack that includes bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage by 1d10 plus your dexterity modifier and monk level. Then, if you reduce the damage to 0, you can use a focus point to redirect the attack to a creature within 5 feet for melee attacks or 60 feet for ranged attacks. They'll then make a saving throw against damage based on your martial arts die and dexterity modifier, but that damage isn't really what I'm excited about here anyway. This is a reaction that you can make every single turn without expending any resources, and it even works on attacks that do extra poison or necrotic or fire or whatever kind of damage, so long as it includes bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing too. I really thought we were going to see the monk get a larger hit die with more hit points by extension, but now I can see why we didn't. Saving yourself on that much damage on most turns of combat is a game changer, especially at just level 3. But we also get to pick from 4 improved subclasses for the monk now as well. The Mercy Monk makes a triumphant return after becoming one of the best subclasses for monk in the old rules, and is more or less a reprint with a few slight tweaks. So you'll still be able to do equal measures of harm and healing to your allies and enemies as you maneuver around the battlefield with the new bells and whistles of the base class. The Warrior of Shadow also reappears with some marked improvements, like being able to cast a movable darkness that you can see in, as well as minor illusion. It gives you dark vision or improves it if you have it already, and strengthens your shadow step ability that formerly only allowed you to teleport in and out of areas of dim light or darkness. Now you can spend a focus point to ignore that restriction, as well as make an unarmed strike immediately after you teleport as part of the same bonus action. We're even treated to an all-new 17th level ability that basically gives us invisibility for a minute with a few slight restrictions for advantage on a ridiculous number of attacks with Flurry of Blows, which conveniently doesn't cost us focus points to activate while in this state. The Warrior of the Elements is also in the 2024 rule set after a pretty poor showing in the 2014 rules, but that is certainly not the case this time around. With this new version, the old Elemental Attunement flavor feature gets altered into one that grants you a 10-foot reach on your unarmed strikes and deals acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage. On top of that, we'll get evocative abilities like a 10-foot push or pull against a saving throw, and the ability to create AoE elemental bursts of damage up to 120 feet away as our power reaches a fever pitch. And of course, the Warrior of the Open Hand needed to return here too. As the quintessential monk subclass, this option remains largely unchanged aside from a few tweaks that were really equal parts buff and nerf compared to the old one. I'm still excited to be able to deliver a death blow from Quivering Palm using 4 focus points for 10d12 force damage in future games. Then, according to the playtest, we should still expect to see our old slow fall ability at 4th level that allows us to use our reaction and reduce any fall damage we would take by 5 times our monk level. And we will still be getting chances for ability score improvements or other feats at our usual 4th, 8th, 12th, and 16th levels, but you may notice that I didn't mention 19th level, and I'll explain why in just a moment. First, let's address the elephant in the room. All of these improvements did come at a cost, as Stunning Strike has seen some serious nerfs in the new rules. It can now be used when you land a hit with an unarmed strike or a monk weapon, but the stun condition now only lasts until the start of your next turn instead of the end. Any hopes of chaining stuns is further diminished by the fact that we can only use Stunning Strike once per turn now as well. Although creatures that succeed on their Constitution saving throw do still have their speed halved until the start of your next turn, and are subject to advantage on the next attack roll made against them. I think some monk fans may be hard pressed to let this one go, but honestly, I'm kinda happy about this change. The old version of Stunning Strike was extremely powerful when it came online, and it more or less just made the monk class into a stun machine most of the time. And when that didn't work, it kind of felt like the whole class just fell apart. With Stunning Strike's relative strength a little lower on the totem pole, we now have a class that can be a lot more than just telling your DM that their monsters can't do anything round after round. In addition to Stunning Strike at this level, we'll get our usual extra attack feature as well as access to the new Empowered Strike feature that more or less replaces the old Key Empowered Strike feature that we used to get at 6th level. This essentially gives you the option to make all of your unarmed strikes deal force damage instead of the non-magical bludgeoning damage they used to do. Evasion still comes online at 7th level, so we can take no damage instead of half damage when we succeed on dex saving throws and half damage when we fail them. And level 9 doesn't see much change either, as you can still run across vertical surfaces and across liquids on your turn without falling in during your move. Then, in a complete deviation from the old monk, we'll get a number of core improvements at 10th level, including an extra attack when we use our Flurry of Blows, temp HP equal to 2 rolls of our martial arts die when we use patient defense, and the ability to move a willing large or smaller creature with you when you use Step of the Wind. These boosts do a pretty nice job of helping the monk scale competitively in later levels where it used to start falling flat. But even that isn't everything. We'll also be able to avoid levels of exhaustion that come from going without food or water, and we can end the charmed, frightened, or poisoned condition on ourselves at the end of our turns. Realistically, I don't think the exhaustion bit will come up often, but I'd say this is certainly more useful than the old immunity to disease and poison that we used to get here. And it's really nice that getting rid of the conditions it lists just happens at the end of your turn with no action or bonus action needed from you. Then at level 13, our deflect attacks will get an upgrade so that we can now reduce the damage of any attacks that carry any damage type. Again, I'm not sure we'll be redirecting these all that often, but the flavor and the staying power that this affords our monk with a D8 hit die is absolutely vital and quite strong given that we can do this as often as we need to. Level 14 will still grant us a pretty generous proficiency in all saving throws, along with the ability to spend a focus point to attempt a saving throw that you fail, and 15th level replaces the relatively useless anti-aging flavor feature from 2014 with perfect focus, an ability that ensures we always have 4 focus points anytime we roll initiative with less than 4 points available. So we can always do cool stuff, even if we've already used our uncanny metabolism feature from earlier. We'll gain a superior defense at level 18, wherein we can expend 3 focus points to gain resistance to all damage types except force for 1 minute, which we'll always be able to do at the start of a combat thanks to our perfect focus. This also doesn't require any action from us. It's just something we can activate at the start of our turn. So it's pretty well suited for an ability we'd get this late in the game, and it does wonders for our staying power considering that we can also use deflect energy to further reduce any damage beyond this. Then at level 19, every class will have a chance to take an epic boon instead of a regular feat. These epic boons are extremely powerful too, so even though you can still take an ability score improvement or another feat, you probably won't want to. But at level 20, the Monk's Capstone gets a huge improvement, now increasing the Monk's base dexterity and wisdom scores by 4 each, up to a maximum of 25. That's way better than the old capstone that we now get at level 15. The playtesting process really seems to have done the monk a service, since the printed monk is a long way off from where it started, and I couldn't be more pleased. I've heard a lot of issue taken with the fact that the monk didn't get weapon mastery like the other martial classes, and while I do think it would have been fun to have, I think this class stands up among the rest just fine without it. In a surprising shift, the monk now feels like it'll outperform other martials in terms of tanking damage while it skirmishes in and out of range of various enemies with tons of great movement and maneuverability abilities, and doing so pretty flavorfully at that. But believe it or not, they aren't the only ones that went from 0 to hero in this rules update. The Warlock has gotten some massive improvements as well. Starting out in Warlock, we won't get to choose our subclass at level 1 anymore, but we will still get our Pact Magic feature as normal. However, what we will access here instead of our subclass is arguably much better. Eldritch Invocations are now available starting at level 1, and they boast some really important changes and upgrades, including the ability to apply certain invocations like Agonizing Blast to any of your Warlock cantrips and not just Eldritch Blast. Now, Eldritch Blast may still be the best option in many cases, but there appears to be some room to get creative here, like using Agonizing Blast to increase the damage output of an AoE cantrip like Thunderclap. At the very least, this change is flavorful, and at best, it's damn powerful at just first level, and we aren't even done with the upgrades to this feature. While you will have to wait to pick up Agonizing Blast until you're at least level 2, the Pact Boon options are now invocations instead, and they're all available at level 1. That's 2 levels earlier than before, and you'll no longer have to choose between them. You could even get them all if you'd like. Many of those old Pact boons have been upgraded as well, like the Pact of the Chain option that now boasts several new familiars for you to use, like the much anticipated Sphinx of Wonder. Additionally, invocations that allow you to cast certain spells no longer require you to use a spell slot, with Eldritch Smite being the sole exception. So you can save those spell slots as a separate resource from your invocation uses. And finally, unlike before, some of these invocations can even be taken more than once, though it's not entirely clear if we can stack them by putting something like Agonizing Blast onto Eldritch Blast twice. I highly doubt that'll be allowed. Then at level 2, we'll gain a feature similar to the Monk's Uncanny Metabolism. Our spell slots will still come back on a short rest, but to alleviate the strain of our limited resources, we'll be able to spend 1 minute to perform a ritual to recover half of our maximum number of slots, rounded up once per long rest, using our magical cunning feature. Really, this seems like a small change, but I think the extra spell slot access here should be just enough to serve us between short rests. When we arrive at level 3, we'll get to choose either the archfey, celestial, fiend, or great old one as our warlock patron subclass instead of at level 1. Each one will grant us additional always prepared spells and a pretty big expansion on flavor and abilities that'll largely shape the way we play our Warlock. The archfey patron has been reworked pretty heavily and now gives your Warlock teleports galore via free castings of Misty Step, along with temp HP and taunting effects when you use it, as well as an option for casting the spell as a reaction to taking damage. You'll later get more options for dealing psychic damage as part of that casting of Misty Step, or you can alternatively just turn yourself invisible. Eventually, you'll even be able to automatically cast Misty Step for free when you cast an illusion or enchantment spell, so there's a lot of combo potential here in silly fey flavor. It's hard to deny that this will probably be my personal favorite subclass of the bunch. The Celestial option is mostly the same as it was in 2014, but there are a few upgrades, like how the old Celestial Resilience feature now grants temporary hit points when you finish your magical cunning ritual or complete a short rest. You'll also be able to revive yourself or your allies whenever they would make a death saving throw, so that they recover half their hit points and deal AoE radiant damage as they rise in a blaze of blinding radiant light. I actually covered the Great Old One Warlock in detail in this video, since we got the specifics on that subclass early, if you'd like to check that one out. It's really good now. And Fiend Warlocks got some healthy upgrades, like the ability to gain temporary hit points from a creature falling to 0 whether you do the damage or they fall to 0 within 10 feet of you. You can now add a d10 to an ability check or saving throw charisma modifier number of times per long rest instead of just once. You can gain resistance to any damage type aside from force when you finish a short rest without that resistance being bypassed by magical or silvered weapons like before, and your Hurl Through Hell ability can be used more than once per long rest by using a spell slot to do so. Just like before, we'll get an ASI or feat at 4th, 8th, 12th, and 16th levels, with an epic boon at 19th level, and all the way at level 9, Warlocks will now be able to contact their patron for free once per long rest via the Contact Other Plane spell, automatically succeeding the intelligence saving throw required so they can ask their patron 5 free questions every day. And if knowing your patron's top 5 most embarrassing moments isn't enough, you can also cast this spell as normal with your Pact Magic spell slots. This is a decent flavor option that I think will see plenty of use as an avenue for creating a closer relationship between a player's character and the DM's roleplay of their patron. And it's certainly a lot better than the nothing we got before. At level 11, we'll get our same old Mystic Arcanum uses as we did in 2014. This first iteration allows us to take a 6th level Warlock spell that we can then cast for free once per long rest. We'll then get a 7th level spell to use this way at 13th level, 8th level spell at 15th level, and 9th level spell at 17th level, just like before. But now we can optionally swap out one of those selections each time we gain a Warlock level with a spell of the same level. Just a bit of a quality of life improvement here. Then at level 20, we'll get a noteworthy boost to our magical cunning feature that now allows us to regain all Warlock spell slots when we conduct our 1-minute ritual. Now, while this capstone isn't quite as great as what we just saw from the monk, I'd wager that we'll get plenty of mileage out of it, especially since our spell slots are all level 5 by the time we get here. I'm not going to complain about having 4 extra 5th level spell slots. However, I think the really important part of Warlock here isn't actually the spells. I'm not sure it ever was. Earlier access to Eldritch Invocations means that we'll be stronger sooner, and that we'll be getting a lot more of them as we level too, obtaining as many as 10 invocations in our later levels. And there are so many invocations that we just haven't seen yet, and you can bet we'll be checking those out in a future video soon. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on that future guide. But even with all this, the Warlock may still not be the best caster in 2024. That title may very well belong to the Sorcerer now. It comes as no surprise that we'll begin our Sorcerer's journey with spellcasting at level 1. But it's important to note that we'll be able to have more spells ready in our repertoire than we did before, and we'll actually be able to swap out our cantrips as we level now. What's even more impressive is that we'll be getting a new innate sorcery feature right off the bat here. Twice per long rest, we can use a bonus action to enter a state of raw magical power for 1 minute, wherein the save DC for our sorcerer spells increases by 1 and we have advantage on attack rolls for our sorcerer spells. This alone is a massive upgrade and really seems to encourage utilizing spells with attack rolls more often than not, but I'll take the +1 to save DC at level 1 any day. I mean, effectively, this makes the sorcerer the most potent spellcaster in the game off the jump, which is really the point, right? It makes me wonder why we didn't have something this flavorful and mechanically viable before. We'll also see our meta magic coming online at level 2 instead of level 3, alongside gaining access to our sorcery points, so we'll be able to do more earlier on that font as well.
Oh, I get it. Font of magic, funny.
Yeah, it's stupid. I'm fucking dumb. I'm sorry. We'll get to choose 2 meta magic options now and 2 more at 10th and 17th level, choosing from a list of 10 that does include the options previously added in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, but many of them have been tweaked just a little. Careful Spell now sees your allies take no damage from your sorcerer spells when they make a save for half damage. Extended Spell now gives you advantage on concentration checks for spells you extend in this way. Heightened Spell only costs 2 sorcery points instead of 3 and affects any subsequent saves that a target makes against the heightened spell, so it'll be easier to keep an enemy locked into spells like Hold Person. Seeking Spell only costs 1 sorcery point instead of 2. Subtle Spell now allows you to ignore material spell components in addition to verbal and somatic if the material doesn't have a gold cost associated and isn't consumed by the spell, and Twin Spell is one of the few that unfortunately got a bit of a nerf. Now you can only use it on spells that allow multiple targets via upcasting. It's a sad restriction for arguably the best meta magic from before, but like the Monk's Stunning Strike, I think it'll encourage players to use more other options with more regularity and make playing Sorcerer more fun overall. At level 3, we'll get to pick from Aberrant Mind, Clockwork, Draconic, and Wild Magic as our Sorcerer subclass, but all of these options, except for the Wild Magic Sorcerer, will come with expanded spell lists. But I wouldn't fret too much about the Wild Magic Sorcerer just yet. It's got a lot more going for it than just expanded spells. Firstly, the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer saw mostly minor tweaks and will no longer allow us to replace spells in our spell list with divination and enchantment entries from the Sorcerer, Warlock, or Wizard spell list, but your telepathic speech feature will stay linked to the chosen creature even if you're incapacitated or unconscious. Additionally, our psionic sorcery feature that previously allowed us to cast our psionic spells by spending sorcery points equal to the spell's level still works as normal, but no longer allows us to ignore material components with a specified cost. Regardless of these slight changes that culminate in a nerf overall, the subclass still looks pretty great and will couple well with the rest of the Sorcerer base class improvements, of which there are still plenty more. The Clockwork subclass also saw just a couple of minor tweaks in similar fashion to the Aberrant Mind. We can no longer swap our Clockwork spells with Abjuration and Transmutation spells from the Sorcerer, Warlock, or Wizard spell lists, and the Restore Balance feature can be used Charisma modifier number of times instead of being tied to our proficiency bonus. This was also a pretty great subclass before, so I'm fine to see it remain mostly unchanged. The Draconic Sorcerer, on the other hand, has changed a lot, and it's a lot better now. It comes with its own set of expanded spells, unlike its 2014 counterpart, a better calculation for your unarmored AC, which is now 10 plus your dexterity and charisma modifiers, a way to gain resistance to the damage type of your Draconic ancestry when you cast a corresponding spell, a set of dragon wings with a really fast fly speed, and even the ability to cast the Summon Dragon spell without concentration, a spell slot, or material components. I love that we're seeing this refresh so that it's a bit more usable than it used to be, and we've seen a similar retooling of the Wild Magic Sorcerer as well. To start, the Wild Magic random table has been reorganized to make it even more chaotic than before, with new results and better organization. And those surges will now trigger on natural 20s instead of natural 1s. More importantly, we'll no longer have to wait for our DM to trigger a surge after we use our Tides of Chaos ability in order to get it back. It'll just happen automatically when we cast a leveled sorcerer spell, so I'd expect to be rolling those D100s a lot more often. And we'll be getting advantage on our D20 rolls constantly, with a consistently refreshed Tides of Chaos ability. Also, our Bend Luck feature now only costs 1 sorcery point instead of 2, so we'll be helping our allies and tripping up our enemies with 1d4 to their rolls more often as well. And to top it all off, we'll be getting a new feature at level 18 that allows us to automatically trigger our wild magic and pretty much select the result that we want once per day. The old features themselves may not have changed much, but this subclass is definitely going to be a powerhouse now. People will be taking this one for more than just flavor moving forward. Then, once again, we'll get an ASI or other feat at 4th, 8th, 12th, and 16th levels with an epic boon at 19th level. We'll then get yet another new feature at level 5 called Sorceress Restoration that allows us to regain half our level in sorcery points rounded down on a short rest. On the surface, this seems akin to what the Warlock and Monk have in terms of replenishing resources, but it's better than you might think. You could, for example, convert some of your sorcery points into spells before you use it to make sure that you're refueled in that regard too, and you're getting the most out of the feature. At 7th level, Sorcery Incarnate will expand the usability of our innate sorcery feature from earlier by allowing us to regain one of our 2 uses of the feature in exchange for 2 sorcery points. Additionally, when the feature is active, we'll be able to use up to 2 metamagic options at a time. Granted, we will be burning through our resources pretty quickly when doing so, but I don't mind having the option, and draining yourself of power for a few rounds of extra potential definitely sounds like a sorcerer thing to do. Then level 20 introduces a new feature that's hard to pronounce and allows us to use a metamagic option without expending sorcery points once per turn while we are in our innate sorcery state. While this feature feels a little lackluster to me when compared with what we got at the start, I actually think that's a good thing. I'd rather have my +1 to spell saves and advantage right at level 1 along with most of my sorcerer toolkit by level 2. In my eyes, it's this front loading and additional potency alongside the improved subclasses and better spell selection that takes the sorcerer from good to great and might even make it the best class in 2024. Regardless, subscribe to the channel for more guides and videos like this one where I take a look at the classes that may be the weakest in 2024. And until next time, go out there and make some chaos.